The Great Hall of Adjudication towered over Dominic, its spiraling architecture designed to intimidate. His muscles strained against Venturi gravity, each step a testament to his determination as he approached the council dais. The environmental suit keeping him alive hummed softly, drawing disapproving looks from the assembled Venturi nobles. Elora stood across the chamber, surrounded by her family representatives. Her scales had dulled to a muted gray, the color of resignation. Beside her stood a tall Venturi male, presumably her new intended bondmate. The head adjudicator's voice boomed through the hall. "We convene to formalize the binding between houses T. Varen and Mactari. All prior claims have been." "I contest this binding," Dominic's voice carried through his translator, the human words transforming into the musical tones of High Venturi. A ripple of shock moved through the assembly. Elora's scales flickered momentarily with gold before she controlled her reaction. "A human dares interrupt our sacred proceedings," the adjudicator's voice dripped with disdain. "Remove this creature." "I claim right of prior offer," Dominic continued, using the formal language Elora had taught him. "At the convergence ceremony, I extended bond offer to Elora T. Varen. By your own ancient law, she has the right to choose." The adjudicator consulted hurriedly with legal advisors. "This, human, references the statute of voluntary bonding. It has not been invoked in 7 generations." "But it remains valid law," said an elderly Venturi from the council bench. "I witnessed his offer at the convergence, unorthodox but within the technical parameters of a bond offer." Elora's family representative stepped forward. "This is absurd. Humans cannot survive on our world. Their biology is incompatible with ours. Any binding would be purely symbolic, failing the requirement of genetic viability." "Is that the true measure of a binding?" Dominic challenged. "Your history speaks of bonds of spirit, of minds meeting in harmony. Before you reduced it to political arrangement and genetic calculation, your people valued connection above all." A murmur spread through the assembly. The adjudicator raised all 4 arms for silence. "Elora T. Varen, you have heard the human's claim. Do you acknowledge it?" All eyes turned to Elora, whose scales began to shift from gray to vibrant blue. She stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "I acknowledge and accept his claim. I choose Dominic Archer as my bonded." Her family erupted in protests as the hall dissolved into chaos. Through it all, Dominic's eyes remained locked with Elora's, a silent promise passing between them. The adjudicator's voice cut through the tumult. "Silence, the statute is clear. The choice once made cannot be challenged." He fixed Dominic with a stern gaze. "Human, do you understand what you are undertaking? Your physiology will require constant support on our world. You may never return to Earth." "I understand," Dominic replied, "and I choose this path freely." Hours later, in the private chamber granted to them as newly acknowledged bondmates, Elora's scales shimmered with brilliant gold as she helped Dominic adjust his environmental controls. "You crossed 12 systems to reach me," she said, wonder in her voice, "knowing you might never see your world again." "You are my world now," he replied simply. Their foreheads touched in the Venturi gesture of deepest intimacy, followed by the human kiss that had become their bridge between cultures. "The council is in an uproar," she told him. "Some see our union as an abomination, others as the beginning of a new era of true understanding between species." "And what do you see?" he asked. Her 4 arms encircled him gently. "I see possibility, a path neither of our peoples imagined, yet perhaps the one we most need." Beyond their chamber, diplomatic channels buzzed with urgent communications. Earth demanded explanations. The Venturi high families called for traditional preservation. Yet within their small sanctuary, Dominic and Elora had created something revolutionary, a connection that transcended biology and politics. "It won't be easy," Dominic acknowledged, feeling the strain of Venturi gravity even as he held her. "The most meaningful paths rarely are." Her scales rippled with determination and love, a color pattern unique to their bond. "But we will walk it together." As twin suns set over the Venturi capital, 2 beings from worlds apart embraced their shared future, one gesture of defiance becoming the first step toward a profound transformation that would eventually reshape the stars themselves. 3 weeks into what should have been a diplomatic disaster, Dominic found himself in the unlikeliest of positions. designated cultural liaison to the Venturi delegation. Ambassador Wellington had recognized an unexpected opportunity in the aftermath of the ceremony. Rather than damage control, the human contingent had pivoted to embrace Dominic's impulsive action as a demonstration of Earth's commitment to authentic relations. The sunset gardens of the diplomatic compound had become their regular meeting place. Elora sat beside him on a bench designed to accommodate various physiologies, her scales catching the fading light in iridescent patterns. "Your superiors are quite skilled at transforming potential catastrophe into advantage," she observed, a hint of admiration in her tone. Dominic laughed. "Humans call it spinning the narrative, but I'm grateful it means I get to continue our conversations." "As am I," her secondary arms made that fluid gesture he'd come to recognize as pleasure. "Though my family remains concerned about our association." "Just concerned, that seems mild." "I simplified for your benefit." Her scales rippled briefly with darker hues. "The actual translation would be closer to horrified disapproval with hints of impending disownment." Dominic winced. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Elora's primary hand moved hesitantly before settling lightly on his, the first time she had initiated physical contact. "I've spent my life as a diplomatic instrument. These conversations with you are the first choices that feel truly my own." The warmth of her touch sent an unexpected current through him. Her skin was smoother than it appeared, with a pleasant warmth that surprised him. "Your temperature is higher than I expected," she said, echoing his thoughts with typical Venturi directness. "Is that good?" he asked, suddenly self-conscious. "It is intriguing." Her multifaceted eyes studied their joined hands. "There is much about humans I find intriguing." As sunset deepened into twilight, their conversation moved into more personal territory. Elora described her childhood on the Venturi homeworld, the rigorous training that had shaped her into a diplomatic asset. Dominic shared his journey from a small town in New Zealand to the interstellar diplomatic corps. "May I try something?" Elora asked suddenly. When he nodded, she slowly raised her hand to his face, her touch feather-light as she traced the contours of his features. "Your species expresses so much through these facial movements. Fascinating." Dominic's breath caught at her touch. "And how do Venturi express closeness?" In response, she leaned forward until their foreheads touched lightly. "This is a gesture reserved for those in one's innermost circle, the sharing of thought space." The intimacy of the moment sent a pleasant shiver through him. They stayed that way, connected in the gathering darkness, until a soft alert chimed from Elora's communication device. "My family's representatives have arrived early," she said, reluctantly pulling away. "They seek to correct my recent behavioral anomalies." "Will you be okay?" Her scales flickered with determination. "I am no longer merely a diplomatic instrument. This connection between us, it matters." Later that night, a private message arrived in Dominic's quarters. "The gardens, midnight." When he arrived, Elora was waiting, her scales glowing softly in the darkness. Without words, she took his hands in all four of hers. "My family has forbidden further contact," she whispered. "They're arranging another binding ceremony." Instead of responding with words, Dominic slowly leaned forward until their foreheads touched in the Venturi gesture of intimacy. Her scales rippled with golden light as she pulled him closer, their bodies meeting in an embrace that transcended species. Their lips met hesitantly at first, then with growing certainty, a human gesture she had studied but never experienced. Under twin moons, they discovered a new language of touch, bridging the gap between their different forms with gentle exploration and whispered guidance. As diplomatic worlds collided in the distance, they created their own private universe of connection, one that would soon face its greatest test. The diplomatic quarters' usual hum of activity had escalated to barely contained chaos. Dominic rushed through crowded corridors, ignoring the stares that followed him, the human who had dared to love across species lines. "You can't see her," said Ambassador Wellington, blocking his path to the Venturi wing. "The High Council has declared your relationship a threat to the Alliance. She's being returned to the Venturi homeworld immediately." "This is absurd," Dominic protested. "How can our relationship possibly threaten interstellar peace?" Wellington's expression softened slightly. "Because symbols matter, Archer. The Venturi value order and hierarchy above all else. Your relationship represents chaos. It suggests their people might choose individual connection over collective obligation. I need to see her before she leaves. Impossible. Her family has invoked protection protocols. They're claiming you've influenced her through some form of human manipulation. Wellington handed him a data pad. And there's more. You're being reassigned to Earth, effective immediately. Dominic's world seemed to collapse inward. 6 weeks of growing intimacy with Alora, learning the meaning of her color changes, the significance of each gesture, the way her dual hearts beat in perfect counterpoint, all ending without even a goodbye. Back in his quarters, he found everything already packed for departure. Only a small crystalline object remained on his desk, a Venturi communication device. With trembling fingers, he activated it. Alora's image appeared, her scales a deep indigo of distress. Dominic, they're separating us. My family claims your influence has compromised my genetic stability, nonsense meant to justify their prejudice. Her voice contained an edge he'd never heard before. I'm being escorted home for realignment. Once there, they'll likely suppress my memories of you. His heart constricted painfully. Alora, I'll find a way. Listen carefully. Her image leaned closer. There is a possibility, though it means sacrifice for both of us. Venturi law recognizes the right of choice for those who have received a formal bond offer. Your gesture at the ceremony could be interpreted as such, but only if you appear before the High Council within 30 days to formalize your claim. I'll do it, whatever it takes. Her scales shimmered briefly with gold, hope mingled with fear. The journey to my world takes 28 days by your fastest vessels. The window is deliberately narrow. I'll find a way there, he promised. If you come, you may never return to Earth. My world is harsh for humans, different atmosphere, higher gravity, and my people. They will not welcome you. I don't care. Her expression softened. That impulsivity that first drew me to you, the image flickered. They're coming. Remember, 30 days. After that, I'll be bound to another, and any claim you might make will be void. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Dominic staring at empty space. Less than a day later, he watched from a viewport as the Venturi diplomatic vessel departed, carrying Alora away at speeds his human mind could barely comprehend. Ambassador Wellington found him still there hours later. I need to get to the Venturi homeworld, Dominic said without preamble. Impossible. No human has ever been permitted on their world. Then I'll be the first. Wellington studied him for a long moment. You really love her, don't you? Not just the idea of her. More than I thought possible. The older diplomat sighed heavily. There might be a way, not officially sanctioned, of course. There's a trader vessel leaving tomorrow that stops at Proxima Station. From there, you might find passage to the outer reaches of Venturi space. Hope flickered to life in Dominic's chest. Why would you help me? Because 50 years ago, I made the opposite choice, duty over love. I've regretted it every day since. Wellington handed him a data crystal. Your resignation from diplomatic service should you choose to submit it. The choice is yours. 27 days later, Dominic stood at the entry port to Venturi space, his body already struggling with the higher gravity of their orbital station. One day remained before Alora's deadline would expire. One chance to defy convention, politics, and biology itself for a love that had never been meant to exist. The Grand Hall of Convergence shimmered with an ethereal light that seemed to dance across the assembled dignitaries. Representatives from 12 worlds stood in rigid formation, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of interstellar civilization. At the center of it all stood Alora T. Varon, her iridescent scales catching the light in a way that made her appear to be wreathed in blue flame. As second heir to the Venturi Dominion, Alora had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. The alliance ceremony would bind her to Kresh Zulvaran, uniting their houses and strengthening the tenuous peace between their species. She kept her 4 arms positioned in the traditional stance of offering, ignoring the painful constriction of the ceremonial garments against her thoracic ridges. Today, we witness the sacred bonds that shall unite not just 2 noble houses, but 2 civilizations, intoned the arbitrator, her translucent form hovering above the ceremonial platform. Let the binding commence. Alora stepped forward, her movements precise despite her racing hearts. 20 cycles of diplomatic training had taught her to conceal emotion beneath a perfect mask of serenity, yet she couldn't quite suppress the tremor in her secondary limbs, as she extended the ceremonial chalice toward her betrothed. Kresh Zulvarin regarded her with eyes like polished obsidian. Something flickered across his angular features. Was it hesitation? Disgust? Before Alora could process it, he took a deliberate step backward. "I cannot complete this binding," he announced, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent hall. "The House of T-Varin carries a genetic aberration that renders them unworthy of alliance with the Zulvarin lineage." Gasps rippled through the assembly. Alora remained frozen, the chalice still extended in her primary hands while her secondary arms began to tremble visibly. Recent intelligence confirms that the T-Varin bloodline has been compromised by cross-species contamination during the second migration. Their claim to pure Venturi heritage is false. Kresh's words fell like stones in still water. "I withdraw from this binding with regret for the diplomatic inconvenience, but with certainty in my decision." The arbitrator's form pulsed with agitation. "This is unprecedented. The alliance ceremony cannot be halted once initiated without." "Without cause," Kresh finished. "I have provided cause, the binding is void." Alora stood alone at the center of the platform, the ceremonial chalice growing heavy in her hands as whispers erupted throughout the hall. Her family representatives had withdrawn to urgent consultation with their advisors, effectively abandoning her to this public humiliation. The precious alliance, years in the negotiation, was crumbling before her eyes, and she was its failed linchpin. From among the human delegation, Dominic Archer watched the scene unfold with growing discomfort. As Earth's junior diplomatic attaché, he held no significant rank, but something about the naked cruelty of the rejection stirred something primal within him. The alien woman, Alora, maintained her dignity despite the visible tremor in her smaller set of arms. Her scales had darkened to a deep indigo, which his cultural briefing had identified as a sign of extreme distress. Without fully processing the consequences, Dominic stepped forward from the Earth delegation, ignoring the hissed warnings of his superior. The assembled dignitaries fell silent as the human crossed the ceremonial space, a boundary no observer was permitted to cross during an active ceremony. He approached Alora and met her multifaceted eyes, seeing in them a mixture of confusion and wounded pride. Then, with deliberate care, he extended his hand toward her. "Perhaps," he said softly, though his voice carried in the perfect acoustics of the hall, "there is an alternative path to alliance." The diplomatic quarters buzzed with urgent communications as Dominic Archer faced the fury of Ambassador Wellington. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Wellington's face had turned an alarming shade of crimson. 7 years of careful negotiation, and you inject yourself into a Venturi ceremony without authorization. Dominic stood at attention, his diplomatic training holding firm despite his inner turmoil. "With respect, Ambassador, I couldn't stand by while a sentient being was deliberately humiliated for political gain. The genetic claims were fabricated. Kresh's house never intended to honor the alliance." "That's not your determination to make?" Wellington's fist came down hard on his desk. "You're confined to quarters until the Council determines how to proceed. The Venturi are demanding your immediate recall to Earth." Hours later, a soft chime at his door interrupted Dominic's restless packing. When he opened it, Alora T-Varin stood before him, her tall frame necessitating a slight stoop beneath the human-proportioned doorway. Her ceremonial garments had been replaced by a simpler tunic that complemented her now violet scales. "May I enter, Diplomat Archer?" Her voice carried a musical quality that the translation implants couldn't quite capture. He stepped aside, suddenly conscious of his disheveled appearance. "I didn't expect a visit from you. Won't this create more complications?" "My status has already been compromised beyond repair." Her secondary arms made a fluid gesture that his cultural training identified as resigned amusement. "Your human impulsivity has created quite the diplomatic incident." "I'm sorry if I've made things worse for you," Dominic said, genuinely contrite. Alora's multifaceted eyes studied him. "I didn't come to assign blame. I came to understand. Why would you risk your position for someone you don't know?" Dominic considered his answer carefully. "Where I come from, there's a concept called basic decency. It transcends diplomatic protocols." "Fascinating." Alora moved to the viewport, gazing at the stars. "The Venturi value order and predictability above all. Your action was chaotic, disruptive." She turned back to him. "Yet I find myself grateful." What happens now? Dominic asked. My house has recalled me to explain the failure. Your superiors will likely send you back to Earth. The alliance will be renegotiated through different channels. Her scales shifted to a deeper blue. Life will proceed according to new calculations. That seems cold. Is it? Alora moved closer, studying his face with evident curiosity. Your species relies heavily on emotional responses. How does that serve you in diplomatic functions? It reminds us what we're fighting for, Dominic replied. Connection, understanding, not just strategic advantage. Something in her posture softened. Perhaps there is wisdom in that approach. My people consider emotional display a weakness, yet your action today, emotional by our standards, demonstrated considerable strength. Dominic felt a curious warmth spreading through him as she spoke. There was something captivating about her alien perspective, her measured analysis of concepts he took for granted. Would you explain more about human connection? She asked, settling gracefully into a chair designed for a different anatomy. Before we are both recalled and this strange intersection of our paths ends. Hours passed as they talked, moving from formal diplomatic exchange to more personal territory. Dominic described Earth's oceans, which fascinated Alora, whose homeworld was largely arid. She explained the complex social hierarchies of Venturi society, revealing subtle vulnerabilities beneath her composed exterior. I should return before the next cycle, she finally said, rising to her full height. But I would like to continue our discussion. Perhaps there is value in understanding each other beyond political necessity. As she moved toward the door, Dominic felt an unexpected reluctance to see her leave. I'd like that too. Her scales shimmered momentarily with flecks of gold, a color he hadn't seen before. Then perhaps today's disruption served a purpose after all. After she left, Dominic stood at the viewport, watching distant stars. Something significant had shifted between their worlds today and within himself.